Good to go. Right, we'll bring the meeting to order. This meeting is recorded. Recording started. So just remind everyone, mind your P's and Q's, because this will go public later, and it's available on the council's YouTube page. Can I ask everyone switch off your mobile phones or put them to silent mode? If you need to pop out and do a phone call, that's fine. Just discreetly leave the room and do your phone call and come back. That's okay. We'll now call the sederant, and any apologies, please, Stuart.
Thanks very much, Chair. Morning, members. And if you could confirm your presence when I call your name. So, Councillor Mabin.
Present. Good morning.
Thank you. Councillor Cogley.
Here, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Canning.
Present, thanks.
Thank you. Councillor McFadgen. Okay. Councillor Barton.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Sangster.
Here, good morning.
Thank you. Councillor Todd.
Here.
Thank you. Councillor McGregor.
Here, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Lennox.
Morning, I'm here.
Okay. Councillor Kyle.
Present.
Thank you. And Councillor Hogg.
I'm here, thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Stuart. We have a few guests here this morning in respect to the school reports, school inspections. So we welcome Gillian Crawford, head teacher at Comores Primary. Thank you. Welcome, Gillian. We've got Jennifer Mackay, who is head teacher at Sawn Primary School, and that's item 4 on the agenda. Thank you. And Simon Leach is head teacher at Little Mill Primary School and ECC. That's item 5 on the agenda. Thank you, Simon. Hello, Councillor Canning online. Can you mute, please? Thank you. Next part of the agenda, we'll go to declarations of interest. I doubt if there should be any. David, can I clarify declarations of interest?
It would only be if any members of probably any relatives employed in any of the schools covered with inspections or any particular interest in any of the contracts at the end, but I wouldn't have thought of any. I'm not aware of any, but as always, Chair, it's for members to satisfy themselves that they're compliant with the code if they have any interest, but I'm not aware of any as a starter for 10, but if members have any, this would be the time to declare them.
Thank you, David. Elected members, any declarations of interest? There's none, and none online. Thank you. We'll go to next item on the agenda is the minutes of the previous meetings held on 4th of December and also the special meeting held on the 19th of December. I need approval as a correct record for the people that were at that meeting, please.
Happy to move as a correct record, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Lennox.
I'm happy to second that.
Thank you, Councillor Sangster. Any consideration, any matters arising from any of the previous minutes, please? No matters arising. Thank you. Item 3 in the agenda. And we're on to the first of our 3 school inspections this morning, which is Comores Primary School HMI inspection report. We'll go to Graham again, introduce and probably introduce some other education officers in the room as well, Graham. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. Good morning, members. Good morning, colleagues. Yeah, in addition to the head teachers this morning, we're joined by 2 of our quality improvement managers, Lindsay Bull and Julie Watson, and I'll say a wee bit more about their role as I go through the Comores paper. Okay, so welcome, Julie and Lindsay. So, members, I'll move on to the Comores Primary School HMIE inspection report, and the purpose of the report is detailed in paragraph 1. And that is to present the findings of a report by Education Scotland, HMIE, following their inspection of Comores Primary School. Paragraph 2 details the recommendations of the report, and it is a fairly lengthy report. I won't go through every single paragraph in turn, but just to highlight some key areas. Paragraphs 3 to 20 detail the aims of inspection, the inspection process, and involvement, where applicable, of the Care Inspectorate. I'd like to highlight paragraph 8, and the Comores inspection was the short model of inspection, which evaluated 2 quality indicators. In paragraphs 21 to 27, what you'll see, members, is the detail of the quality improvement visits that take place to schools and early childhood centres. And what I would like to highlight this morning is the role of Julie and Lindsay, as well as the rest of the quality improvement team, in contributing to the improved inspection outcomes. I'm sure that come the questions for head teachers, the commentary that you'll hear from head teachers will be that very much so they are supported and challenged through preparation for inspection. But what we are seeing is the work of the quality improvement team is leading to improved inspection outcomes. Members, in paragraph 30, there is details of the date of the inspection, and again, it was the short model. And in paragraph 31, what you'll see is the evaluations for the COMOS inspection. The evaluations are, as you can see in the paragraph 31, learning, teaching and assessment, satisfactory, and raising attainment and achievement is good. What I would like to do is highlight in paragraph 32 some of the strengths that the inspection team found. And that was that the head teacher and staff work very well together to create positive and respectful relationships with children and the community. And if you've ever visited COMOS, you'll certainly be able to relate to the next comment, and that is that there's a welcoming, nurturing and inclusive ethos across the school as a result. Inspectors identified that children are confident, polite and well-mannered, and they engage well with visitors and keen to share their experiences, and they're very proud of their school and community. And all children participate enthusiastically in pupil community leadership groups. They feel valued and listened to within the school and the wider community as a result. Staff support children very well to develop skills for learning, life and work through these opportunities. And the head teacher and staff provide a wide range of highly effective supports to reduce the cost of the school day, and children and families benefit greatly from staff's discreet and caring approaches. So members, that's the strengths that were identified. In the next paragraph, paragraph 33, what you'll see is that inspectors highlighted areas where continued improvement could be made. And it's important to highlight that it's continued because some of these improvements were already underway and planned for. I'll just highlight a couple of them. Continue to build a shared understanding of high quality learning, teaching and assessment. That's hugely important in the context of when the school was inspected, and very early in the term in September, and the fact that at that point the school had 5 new teachers in place. You know, it does take time for that high quality, consistent learning and teaching to take place across all classes, particularly where you've got 5 new teachers in place, which is a significant proportion of the teachers that were in COMOS Primary School at that time. I would also like to highlight that develop further staff understanding of how to analyse and use information about children's learning. They need to use this information to plan more effectively learning to improve outcomes for all children. Again, that's tied to the fact that we've got a significantly number of new teachers in the school. So just want to highlight that point, members, because it is hugely important. Importantly, though, what you'll see is in paragraph 38 is that despite the fact that there was new teachers in the school and they do have inspectors had identified areas for continued improvement, what you'll see is that inspectors have reported that they are confident that the school has capacity to continue to improve. Therefore, no further visits will be made in connection with this inspection. So all in all, members, a positive outcome from the inspection, clearly strengths identified by inspectors and clearly areas to continue to work on. I'm happy to take any questions, and similarly so is Gillian. So hand over to the Chair.
Thank you very much, Graham. A very good inspection. I think before we go questions elected members, I think probably best to go to the head teacher and just get her view of the preparation that's needed to do a school inspection, the stress involved, and also dealing with 5 new teachers, as Graham's telling us, and your experience of the actual inspection process when they did come to visit your school. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, undeniably it was a stressful period of time for myself and my staff, but I was extremely well supported by Julie as Quality Improvement Officer and also by Graham. But I was also really well supported by my head teacher colleagues across the authority. So those who had been through recent inspections were on the phone straight away. They were sharing resources, giving advice, and then also received a lot of personal support from them. So actually through the whole process, I felt really well supported. I was also supported by the inspection team that came in, and although it is a situation where you're under scrutiny, I did feel really supported by the lead inspector. They were really open to listening to me, listening to my experiences, and they did provide support and advice on the areas for improvement. So overall, I felt it was a positive learning experience for myself and the school, and then I will hopefully join that, or I will join that team of head teachers to then go on and support further colleagues when they experience inspection.
Very good, thank you. I'll go to elected members now if we have any questions or comments for Gillian or for Graham. And Councillor Sangster and then Councillor Kyle.
Yeah, good morning. Thank you, Chair, and thank you for this report. You know, I want to highlight obviously section 32. You know, having 5 new teachers and having these strengths. That's been a really positive thing, so well done there. Obviously this is governance and scrutiny, so obviously I have to kind of go into section 33. Just a couple of questions. I'm just wondering about the pupil equity funding, the PEF funding, targeted more closely to tackle poverty-related attainment gaps in children's learning. Has that been an issue at Comores, and how are you going to use the PEF funding to obviously tackle that? And my second question is around the comment about senior leaders and local authority have worked together to take forward areas for improvement in safeguarding, which required urgent action. That's obviously a wee bit of a concern. I just want to drill down a wee bit more on what we mean by safeguarding and why urgent action was required, and why the local authority had to obviously intervene as well as the senior leaders. Thank you.
Who wants to do that?
Yeah, I'll
Gillian,
start off round about the pupil equity fund, if that's all right. So when I presented to the inspection team, it was very much round about the context of Comores Primary. Our school has very few children who reside in SIMDs 1 and 2. The majority of our children reside in SIMDs 4 to 6. And actually what that represents is hidden poverty within Comores Primary. And we very much recognise our children and families that are living in excuse me, SIMDs 5 and 6, but we know that they struggle from day to day. So we have targeted our pupil equity fund towards those children that we know need the support and need the support to close the poverty-related attainment gap. So when we monitor our poverty-related attainment gap in Comores Primary, we look at SIMDs 1 to 4 versus SIMD 5 to 10. So our context is slightly different from those schools that maybe have a more obvious poverty-related attainment gap. But following the inspection, we're really scrutinising our data and making sure that the children that are in SIMD 1 and 2 are receiving, targeted support overall. But we feel that our approach reflects the community that we live in.
Yeah, thank you for that.
Well done, thank you, Councillor Sangster. Councillor Kyle.
Sorry. Yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Graham.
Thanks, Chair. Councillor Sangster, this was the safeguarding matter was in relation to allergens in the lunch hall. And the reason why it was hugely important was because obviously that's not just applicable to Comores, that's applicable to all schools. I'm pleased to say that Catering have taken forward the recommendations that came from the HMI team in the weeks following the inspection, and they have been able to report back to HMI the actions that have been taken, and they're happy with the procedures that are now in place to ensure the safety of children. So that's why it was urgent, because it was more than just Comores.
No, thank you for clarifying that, and I think it is important, with regards to allergens, particularly in the dining halls and etc. So that's good to hear. Thank you.
Thank you, Graham. Councillor Kyle, and then we'll go to Councillor Lennox.
Good morning. Well done in your report. Page 15, paragraph 33. Improve the quality of children's play-based learning across the early stages. The play-based learning, I've heard quite a bit about it. Does it work well or does it need changes?
So we're very much on a journey with play-based learning in Comores Primary, as I think many schools are right across Scotland. One of our teachers, in fact, both our teachers in Primary 1 at the point of inspection, one was temporary and had just started, and the other member of staff had just moved into Primary 1. So we were at the point of getting to know our children and looking to see what learned from other schools and other establishments about what's working in play pedagogy. The staff have signed up to undertake professional learning with the University of Strathclyde, which started last week. So we're very much developing our approaches in light of the inspection. It was on our improvement plan to develop that anyway. So that's where we're at working with that.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's a good answer to a good question. Councillor Lennox.
Thank you, Chair. No, I think under the circumstances of 5 new teachers, that's really an excellent result. It could quite easily have gone the other way, but that's testimony, I think, to the hard work that's been going on in the background, and not just the period of the inspection, but all the work that's gone before. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Lennox. I've got Councillor Canning online and then back in the room, Councillor Todd.
Thanks, Peter. Yeah, thanks, Gillian. Just very quickly say thanks for an excellent report. Not really surprising. I mean, I know we've got a very, very strong parent council. I know that the school works very closely with the community. You know, we're doing a lot of stuff with the jugs with the school. So it's not surprising to get a great report. So that was all. Thanks.
Councillor Todd.
Thank you very much, convener. Thanks, guys. Great report. I'd like to ask an overarching question for all the head teachers, if that's okay, because I'm really piqued by the aspect of engagement for extracurricular activities, and it's on. I am surmising it may be difficult for certain families who live in a rural location that are going into the schools to get involved with that very important part of extracurricular stuff. So does it raise much of a burden on parents? How do the head teachers get round involving all of the children that live out with the satellite? Is that a fair question?
That's a very good question. I don't know who wants to take it. Linda?
I'll come in, and then, you know, clearly I think it would be right for Councillor Todd's questions to go to the head teachers. You're absolutely right. It's a bigger issue when a school faces rurality, because ultimately the young people might be accessing transport home at the end of the school day. So certainly, and again, I'll reflect on my own time up in the valley, very much about having stuff on at lunchtime as well, so that there was that equity of access. So you very much plan stuff around about, and very often, and perhaps this is more secondary than primary, there was some PE even before the school started, you know, like basketball club or something like that. And then there was stuff during the day. Clearly, there would still be things after school, but, you know, you've got that hope whereby a lot of the parents carpool, you know, on certain days if there's something on that they want the young people to go to, in order that, you know, clearly the transportation is not the limiting factor around about that. I am hearing of some governmental work in the space around about that very thing, Councillor Todd, about sort of additional time, and I think it will have very much a sort of sporting angle. So again, really good in terms of the health and wellbeing space on a national basis. Not seen the report yet, but I know it's forthcoming. So I'll maybe hand over to the head teachers, if that's okay, if any of them want to come in, because actually all 3 face that aspect of rurality, so you've got the right ones in the room.
Yeah.
Well, we'll go Gillian first, and then Jennifer, and then Simon, about extracurricular activities and stuff. Thank you.
One of the strengths of Comores that was highlighted in the report was our links with the community. So we have built really strong relationships with ScotRail and our local bus service. So we quite often jump on the train at Comores train station, and we access extracurricular activities in Stewarton and also in the Kilmarnock area. We also make use of the bus service with all our children with our bus passes now. So I think you have to engage in some creative thinking to get your children to the places that they need to be. And that's one of the ways we get around it, as well as making really good use of our Active Schools coordinator, who deliver activities that are free in school, at lunchtime, after school, for all of our children.
Thank you. Good morning. I just want to really reiterate what you said about the Active Schools team. They are absolutely fantastic, and they, again, are very creative in the way that they try to provide in different at different times and in different aspects. Although that's Active Schools, they also are very keen to make sure that we are providing extracurricular that doesn't just focus on sport. So we have a lot of lunchtime clubs that then facilitate that and make sure that the children are getting a wide range of extracurricular opportunities. Part of that also is us making sure that our curriculum, for any of those children who are unable to participate at those times, that we are making sure that our curriculum then gives them that extra boost and that extra time to be able to build it into their school day as well.
Thanks, Chair. I suppose it's with real difficulty is the honest answer. When you're very rural, as Rankston is, we don't have much sort of children being bussed away elsewhere. It's just they're very isolated within that community. But with only the community centre within the community, there are strong links with them. I think Active Schools, absolutely, they perform a niche role. When you've got a very small school staff, it's hard to provide those opportunities. You can't have 2 teachers providing a club every day of the week or something like that, that eats into their time. But again, we recently have a book club. We did a drama club when it was coming up to our Christmas show that was after school. So those are the ways in which we meet that need within that as well. But we're always looking for also great vehicles like the Dance Fest that's coming up. So we involve our some of our parents who do dance tutoring. They come in and they run an after school club as well to prepare the children, so they'll be in full display. Is it March? I think I'm not sure. March time at Dance Fest, Little Mill will have a representation, minus me, right enough. But
Brilliant, thank you. Any other questions or comments, elected members, for the Comores School Inspection? I think we're clear. We'll go to page 10 in the report as the recommendations. Elected members, paragraph 2. Note the publication of the inspection report for Comores. Notes the strengths and areas for further improvement. Congratulates children and young people and all of the staff. And note the next steps, otherwise note the contents of the report. Elected members, happy with those recommendations. Thank you very much. And you can sneak out now if you need to go back to the school. That's okay. Right, thank you. We'll move on to the next one, which is Son Primary School Inspection Report. And we're back to Graham again.
Thanks, Chair. And Gillian's just demonstrating there the support that each of our head teachers have for each other. Well done, Gillian. So the SON report, this is purpose of the report is to present the findings of a report by Education Scotland, HMIE, following their inspection of SON Primary School. The recommendations, members, are highlighted in paragraph 2, and I think members, you're familiar with this format of report, so I'll skip through paragraphs 3 to 31, if that's okay, because it's the same format as the previous report. Just to highlight in paragraph 8 that the SON inspection was the short model of inspection, and there was 2 quality indicators evaluated. So what I'll do is I'll skip through to paragraph 31, if that's okay, members, because that's where the detail of the inspection begins. So SON Primary School was inspected in week beginning Monday the 6th of October 2025 with inspectors using the short model. And paragraph 32 shows the evaluations for SON Primary School. Learning, teaching and assessment was good, and reason attainment and achievement was good. Paragraph 33, members, highlights the strengths that HMIE found, inspectors found, and I would like to highlight just a couple of them. So the effective leadership and direction provided by the head teacher. She's enthusiastic and passionate about the school. That will definitely come through when she answers the questions. She supports staff well to provide innovative and creative approaches to children's learning. and a strong focus on developing children's skills and providing meaningful context for them to apply these in their learning. And that's hugely important, those meaningful contexts. And the final strength there, the well-developed approaches to meeting children's learning and social and emotional needs. And again, if you visited the school, you'll certainly have experienced that. Paragraph 34, members, again, just to highlight the wording and the feedback from HMIE inspectors where it said continued improvement. This wasn't new or newly identified improvements that were required. The school was already working on these. So to continued improvement across the school, staff should continue to adapt teaching approaches to provide appropriate pace and challenge for all children. And I'm sure Jenny will say a bit more about this when she speaks about the school, but there is a number of multi-composites in the school, which is a wee bit different from a number of schools that we have across the local authority. So Jenny will certainly say a wee bit more about that. Teachers should continue to develop programmes that build on previous learning more effectively as children move through the school. And the reason I mention that is because of multi-composites. It's hugely challenging to do that. And as I say, Jenny will mention that. And staff should continue to raise attainment further. Colleagues, members, paragraph 35, what you'll note is that inspectors reported that the school has capacity to continue to improve and will make no further visits in connection with this inspection. So at that, I'll stop at this and I'll hand over to Chair. We're happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Graham. And I think, again, that the best idea is to go to Jennifer Mackay as a head teacher and a wee bit of background on her experience. Again, quite stressful how you prepare for a school report and how the actual inspection went when they came to visit. Thank you, Jennifer Mackay.
Thank you. Yes, as Gillian said, it's always quite a stressful time. However, I did go to a head teachers meeting almost immediately after, and I think I surprised colleagues by saying it was actually very enjoyable. We had some really good professional conversations. The inspection team were incredibly supportive. But actually having that external scrutiny meant that we could look at what we were doing to improve the school and check that across the country with their professional knowledge. I personally, I did find it the lead up, not so much. That was quite tricky and there was a lot of work. What the inspection team did do was prior to the inspection, we had a Teams meeting and they were very aware of the fact that I have no senior management team. It's just me. So there's no PT, there's no deputies. And what they were very aware of is that meant that every single question came to me. And the scrutiny was very intense, but the fact that they were aware of that meant that I could have a decent amount of time to discuss with them all aspects of the school. And so much is interrelated that, in fact, if we were looking at attendance and we're looking at ASN, we're looking at attainment, all of these things do interrelate quite closely. And it actually put me in a quite a unique and good position to be able to give them examples from all different aspects of school management. The school is currently, we have 30 pupils and they're in 2 multi-composites. So that's a primary 1 to 4 and a primary 5 to 7. That brings with it some really challenging aspects in terms of planning, teaching and assessment. My staff are incredible. They are so adaptable, so flexible, but they're also very aware of looking outwards. And they spend a lot of time in contact with other schools in the authority, but also out with the authority who are in similar contexts to us to see how they're addressing those challenges and using those ideas. The areas for development here, it's interesting because they are all things that are already in progress. And I very much got the impression from the inspection team that what they were saying was these might be in their infancy, but you're absolutely on the right lines. Keep going. And that was really positive. But I think enjoy, perhaps that's quite a strong word, but it was a good week. It was good. And it was nice to have validation for the work that we're putting in.
Thank you very much, Jennifer. Elected members, comments. We'll go to Councillor Lennox and then Councillor Sangster.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks, Jennifer. A great report again. I've been involved with the school on a couple of occasions. Their celebration of their 175 years. That's a great achievement as well. I've got a personal connection in terms of my uncle and my father went to that school. back in the 1930s, and I think I passed on a school photograph with my uncle in it. So a bit of connection there to the school. In terms of the atmosphere within the school is like a family atmosphere. The teachers are absolutely brilliant with the kids. You can see them. The kids love their teachers, I think, a bit like their parents, probably. And I think the fact that it's a smaller school and the if you take a bigger school, there'll be more teachers to suck up the pressure in terms of a school inspection. So a smaller school, there'll be definitely a bit more added pressure. So great result, well done, and thanks for the invitations to your recent events. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Lennox. Councillor Sangster, and then Councillor Cogley.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And thank you. What a good report. And you know, I absolutely love the fact that you viewed this inspection as a positive thing, and so that you're looking for areas of improvement because you're always wanting to better yourself. And I think that's a really good thing and a positive thing. So thank you for that. You touched on the fact that there's 30 pupils and obviously there's mixed classes and the challenges that brings, obviously. Can you give us some examples of the kind of challenges that brings? So if you've got, I don't know, maybe one teacher teaching you know, different ages and different primary classes, I can imagine that will be a challenge, especially if you've got, I don't know if you have any young people with additional support needs or neurodiversity, and the challenges that would bring in such a small school as well. If you could just give us a wee kind of example and things about that would be great. Thank you.
Yes, of course. It is challenging, and the teachers are very adept now to being able to plan for a variety of age groups. Even in a school where you have one stage, within that class, there is always huge differentiation that's required. So it's not quite as complicated as you might think. However, within the primary 1 to 4, you have early level and then you have first level. And those are two completely different documents in terms of what we are aiming for in their curricular needs. The staff, when I first started 5 years ago, we talked a lot about the planning, because in order to make sure that we are differentiating our teaching accurately and making sure that each of those children is getting the attainment and the personalised teaching that they require, the planning is absolutely vital. So by planning very thoroughly, really carefully, they then look at their pedagogy, and we use play pedagogy down lower in the school, but we use a lot of what we call interdisciplinary learning. And that's something that I have been working on a lot with Education Scotland, and we've brought in those examples into the school. That gives us, that interdisciplinary learning, what it gives us is the ability to address different levels and different needs. By presenting perhaps the same question to the children, but then differentiating either by outcome or ensuring that they have something that pushes them a wee bit further for those who need the challenge. The teachers are quite outstanding with it, and I'm always amazed when I go and sit in the classrooms each day and think, wow, this is a huge amount of work. They're very resilient, but they're also very good at looking out and saying, right, what can we bring to make this even better? And I definitely felt the inspectors had a view of that afterwards. They were very impressed with the staff. I know they came out of the primary 1 to 4 class saying, wow, that is some job. And I said, absolutely. She does it brilliantly, but it's tough. It's really tough. Obviously, in terms of personnel, that can be tricky as well. As somebody was mentioning earlier, when you've got one teacher, there's a huge amount of pressure on them. That's why working as a team, myself with the teaching staff, is so important, that we support each other, both professionally and personally, to make sure that we're able to keep going through those challenges. We currently have 50% on our ASN register. Some of those children have very, very complex needs. And there's a lot of work goes in to making sure that we are providing them with the education that they require. if we have a look in the report, there's a comment from the inspectors that mentions that parents are very aware of how we individualise our children's learning pathways to make sure that it's absolutely appropriate for them. None of the children across the country will learn unless they have that health and well-being there, unless they feel safe and happy, and that's always our first priority. However, we also are very aware of our attainment, and we are aware that our attainment doesn't sit quite as high, although last year we were 100% across the board. This year there will be differences, and that's reflected in our special needs, the children there but what we discussed with the inspection team was that it's about value added, and they were talking very much about their new format that they'd like to see, not just attainment of the national level, but how we add value to each child's learning. And where they've come on their individual journey. I'll be absolutely honest with you, it's a challenge. It is a challenge, and you'll be aware that the children's needs in schools are becoming more vast and varied. And that's all about being, again, as Gillian said, creative, being very aware of the surroundings and the context that each of these children come from. The other advantage we have is that, we're talking about classes of 15. That makes a big difference because we can get very personalised for them and make sure that their learning journey is very specific.
Thank you. Councillor Bannister.
Yeah, it's okay. Just a wee follow-up question, Chair. Thank you. That sounds amazing. I'm just wondering, in the back of my head, I'm thinking, what happens if one of these teachers goes off sick? Is that a challenge? What do you do then?
Yes, absolutely it is. And that's why, and I cannot underestimate the importance of looking after those teachers in terms of their own health and well-being. It's really vital. If they go off through, no fault of their own, we are very fortunate that now over the last 5 years, we've had probationers through and we've had various other visiting teachers and we've made really good connections with them. So there is a sort of team outside of our team who know the school very, very well. And that always helps because, they're coming in and it's not fresh and new. They know all the children. It makes a big difference. And we do have an awful lot of support from our quality improvement team and from the authority in general. So when we are facing those sorts of problems, we know that the support is there if we do need extra bodies or extra people just to help out. Fortunately, and fingers crossed, it hasn't affected us yet. But again, I go back to the fact that it's all about the health and well-being of staff as much as it is of the children.
Yeah, that's lovely. Thank you. Touch wood.
Brilliant, thank you. And I think the key questions in paragraph 15, you just answered them. How good is our leadership? You're an excellent leader with your team, and how good is your staff team? So you're praising them to the highest. How many staff have you got there?
So we have 2 teaching posts. One is split, a 50-50. So we've got 3 teaching members of staff, but it's just 2 teaching posts.
Right, thank you. Councillor Cogley, you might.
Thank you. It's a very fascinating insight into what happens not just in a school, but in a small school. I was going to ask about the numbers of staff, actually. So, and what about the additional support staff in terms of the administrative staff? I'm just trying to build up a picture in my mind as to what the staff room might look like.
Actually, our staff room is absolutely gorgeous. I'll be honest, we're very lucky. The staff room is quite quiet, and we have one classroom assistant who does 16 hours for us. Unfortunately, she's just had a hip operation, so we were just discussing that earlier. So she's away at the moment, and we have one member of staff who is a one-to-one for a pupil who is a looked after child who's actually Glasgow authority. So there is that. I think the important thing with the team is building that resilience. It's been, and working with one another. And I mentioned to the inspectors, I'm very proactive with getting my teachers out into other schools, because you can become quite a silo if you're in a rural school and you get so used to what you're doing that it's so important that they go out and they discuss with colleagues and they get those moderation opportunities, but also to go and observe in other schools, not just like our context, but lots of other schools. So I promote that really strongly through, they have their own learning pathways, my staff members. And that is a really key part of it, is making sure they are looking at other examples and making sure that their practice is as current, but also adapting it to tailor it for the context. They are absolutely excellent. I honestly, I couldn't praise them highly enough. They really are very skilled teachers.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. I mean, Son's a beautiful village and the banks of the River Aire. It's regular for visitors. I know myself and Jim on the motorbike, it's a lovely place to go and visit and drive through and get a cup of tea. I just wondering, it's a small school, you've only 30 pupils. How many you got in your P1 role incoming?
So we have 6 coming in next year at the moment, that may possibly be 7. 3 of those are catchment and 3 are placing requests. We have 60% of our children are placing requests. So they come in from the other villages around. So we've sort of got Mauchline, Galston, Catrin, Cumnock. That's where they come in from. Some come in purely just because the environment is better for that particular child. If they do have particular sensory needs, we're very small, but it's very quiet and a very calm school. And through no fault of any other schools, when it's busy and there's lots of pupils, that can not always be the right environment for a child. So there is that side of it. I think our local community, and I know Councillor Lennox will know this, our local community is incredibly supportive, and we've worked really hard over the last 4 or 5 years to build those connections with the community. I think a lot of that then has gone out to the wider communities who are aware of what a special and unique setup that we have. We're very, very fortunate in not just in resources, but also in terms of what we can give the children individually. So at the moment, we're looking at 60% for our P1s. So we've got 4 leaving in P7, 6 coming in, and that's exactly half and half with placing requests.
Very good, thank you. Any other comments or questions I'd like to members? We'll go back. Yeah, for nothing online. We'll go back to page 18, please. And paragraph 2 is your recommendations. Note the publication of the inspection report for SON. Note the strengths and areas for improvement. Congratulate the young people and staff. Note the next steps and otherwise note contents of the report. Thank you very much. We're happy with that, elected members. Thank you. And thank you, Jennifer. We'll move on to the next one, which is Little Mill or Rankinson. I keep getting mixed up. It's one or the other. Graham.
Thanks, Chair. Members, the purpose of this report is to present the findings of a report by Education Scotland, HMIE, following their follow-up inspection of Little Mill Primary School and Early Childhood Centre. The recommendations are detailed in paragraph 2, and like in previous reports, paragraphs 3 to 8 detail the aims of inspection, the inspection process and involvement where applicable of the Care Inspectorate. Paragraphs 9 to 11 in this report detail the quality improvement visits, which we've already heard from head teachers in terms of the impact from our quality improvement team. And paragraph 12 highlights the initial inspection date of June 2024 and the report that was presented to Governance and Scrutiny in October 2024 following the initial inspection. I would, members, like to highlight the strengths that were identified in that initial inspection report, and they are detailed in paragraphs 13 and 14. And similar to what you've already heard from our previous schools, in paragraph 13, what you'll see is that staff identified in the initial inspection, staff prioritise positive and caring relationships across the school and ECC that support the well-being of children and families. This results in improved levels of engagement and learning amongst children. Inspectors also identified that teachers and practitioners use a range of questions and approaches to improve children's play and learning. Similarly, in that inspection, inspectors identified a need for improvement in some areas, including senior leaders and staff should embed policies, guidance and processes to raise attainment and achievement for all children across the school and ECC. And in that inspection, they identified that senior leaders should support staff to develop further the use of assessments and data to track more clearly how much and how well all children progress over time. Now, these 3 bullet points in paragraph 14 were the focus for the follow-up inspection. So, Members, what I would like to do is, at that point of the initial inspection, the inspectors identified that they would return after 12 months. So what I'd like to do is focus on the follow-up inspection. And a wee bit different from the previous reports that we've heard, in a follow-up inspection, and you'll see this in paragraph 16. And what that details is that in a follow-up inspection, gradings aren't provided, so you won't see good, very good things like that. Instead, what inspectors do is they make a statement regarding the progress that's been made in each area for improvement, and I'll highlight that as I go through the report. In paragraph 17, what you'll see, members, is that in follow-up inspections, there's 3 possible outcomes following the inspection. The HMIE identify that insufficient progress has been made and make a further inspection, or they identify that progress has been made and request the local authority to make a response after 12 to 18 months, or they identify that all areas of improvement have been fully progressed and they disengage from the school. Members, I'd like to draw your attention to paragraph 18, and that is that the follow-up inspection took place in September 2025. Inspectors returned to Littlemill Primary School and Early Childhood Centre to evaluate the progress that had been made with the areas identified from the initial inspection. And what you'll see is in paragraph 20, members, is the key areas for improvement that were identified in the initial inspection and the progress comment on the right-hand side for each of those areas of improvement. So if I take them each in turn, so the first one, senior leaders and staff should embed policies, guidance and processes to raise attainment and achievement. Inspectors noted that since the original inspection, senior leaders and staff have made some progress in addressing this area for improvement. The second area, senior leaders should support staff to develop further the use of assessments and data. Senior leaders and staff have made good progress in their use of assessments and data to track more clearly children's progress over time. And then the final action, senior leaders should continue to improve the quality of learning and teaching across the school and ECC. And inspectors noted that some progress has been made towards improving the quality of learning and teaching, particularly in the ECC, and senior leaders and staff need to continue to focus on this area to secure sustained improvement across the establishment. Members, as you would imagine, there's a context around about this, and we did mention in the Comores report the turnover of staffing, the change in the staffing, and that was very significant to the Littlemill, and I'm sure Simon will say a wee bit about that as we go through the questions. Members, I'd like to highlight the comments in paragraph 21 regarding overall, inspectors have identified that some progress has been made since the original inspection. However, inspectors acknowledge that systems and processes are now in place which will lead to impact. And that gives me great confidence that the systems and processes are there. They will lead to impact. But at the time of the inspection, what the inspectors notified was that further time is required for impact to be demonstrated. Therefore, a further inspection will take place within the next year. Members, I have to say I'm hugely confident in Simon's leadership of the school, and I have full confidence that these actions will lead to further impact by the time inspectors come back and return for the follow-up visit. It's important to highlight the areas where progress has been made since the previous inspection, and that was steps being taken to embed policies, guidance and processes to raise attainment, implementing safeguarding and inclusion policies, celebrating children's achievements and developing leadership roles for children, improved approaches to assessment and professional learning, including nurture and sensory training, has strengthened practitioner confidence and skills to meet the needs of children. So there's a lot going on in the school to meet the requirements of the previous inspection. And as I said, it will lead to impact over time. Improvement priorities identified by inspectors in the visit were to enhance the use of data to track and monitor progress. Simon is absolutely leading on that area. Continue to improve attendance rates of children. That's no real surprise. That's not unique to Littlemill Primary School. That's a challenge that all schools are facing. And evaluate the impact of planning to meet the needs of children across all curricular areas. So the improvement priorities are being addressed via the school's improvement plan, and progress with the priorities are being monitored via the school's own quality assurance processes, and that includes the role of Lindsay Bull, who's here today, the Quality Improvement Manager, who works closely with Simon to monitor the progress throughout the session, and that will continue into the following session. So, members, hugely confident in Simon will lead the school through the required improvements, but I'm happy to stop there and take any questions as is Simon. Okay.
Thank you, Graham. And apologies, I was on Google Maps there checking exactly where Littlemill Primary School was. I thought it was actually in the village of Ankerson, but it's a fair distance down the road for Ankerson. and very much a small rural school out in the countryside. We'll go to Simon next, and again, as the same as we did with the other head teachers, just gives an idea how the inspection report experience was for you, and the stress involved, and how you and your team managed it. Thank you, Simon.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, it's a fair trek down the hill from Rankison to Little Mills, the farm, and sort of at the bottom. So I think on a bleak winter's day, it's not a nice walk for some of the parents and their families down and back up. Yeah, I think Jennifer mentioned about how the inspection process was validating, and I would say that was how I found it was hugely validating in terms of at the beginning of each inspection process, we provide our own evaluation of their progress and our journey towards improvement. And what really cheered me and encouraged me was that what we saw within the school and the team was what the inspectors saw. So that's always a great encouragement, is that we're not operating that our self-evaluation is accurate. And the inspector did draw quite a few times, the lead inspector too. She kept going back to that, and that first morning where we did the presentation, that it did indeed match that. I came a little bit late to the party in terms of the re-inspection, because I just wasn't there for the original inspection, and I came back after 2 years in January. So really, there was from January until again the first couple of weeks in September, where you've got children just taking on those routines again and getting back into the rhythm of school life. But the inspectors were incredibly supportive. They were very, very thorough, and I think that's what cheered me most, was that because of the nature of the rigour and scrutiny that they provided, that really encouraged me. They felt that all the foundations were there. It was just timing. It's just that they're confident, as Graham has said, that those things that have been put in place, it just takes time for them now to embed, and we're already seeing those changes coming to fruition. I think that the support that we've had, likewise from colleagues, from the central team, from Lindsay, from Graham, in terms of the quality assurance led by Derek Forsyth as well, having learning visits, in preparation for the revisit of the inspectors was hugely profitable. It certainly focuses the mind and the energies of the staff. But I think, like my other colleagues have said, that the team spirit of the staff in such a small school, where you are it for so many different things, there's a huge, strong bond amongst the staff. And as Graham highlighted, through the different changes that I've experienced in the context that it has, that is quite unique, the staff have done an amazing job, and I have great confidence in them and the progress and the care that they have for the children under their care. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Simon. And who's bigger? Is your school bigger than Sutton? Know that it's a competition right now.
Yes. Our school roll is 32, and we have an early childhood centre. And also, I have another school and early childhood centre as well. So I'm the only shared head in East Ayrshire, just to point that out.
Well done. We'll go to Councillor Cogley for questions, comments.
Thank you very much. So I'm just trying to build up a picture in my mind as to what it looks like actually inside the school, in terms of the numbers and the ratios and so on. So you've been in post, I think you said, for 2 years.
Sorry, I arrived 2020, just before the pandemic. I took over both Dalrymple and Little Mill primaries. But I was from 2023 to I was seconded for 2 years with the Scottish Government, working for the South West Education Improvement Collaborative.
Right. Okay. Thank you. That's very helpful. And how many? So we've got 32 pupils. How many teaching staff and how many support staff or admin staff? It's again just trying to build up an image as to what it's like in the school. Thank you.
Yeah, it's 2 classes. We've opted to go from primary 1 to 3 and primary 4 to 7. It's just with the numbers, it's just where the split falls in relation to that. So we have 2 teachers. We have one, they're both part-time. So I have a deputy head teacher across both schools for Dalrymple and Little Mill, but I've chosen to keep the deputy head teacher at Little Mill full-time at the moment because of the level of the need and because of the scrutiny and the focus that needs to be an improvement. And then have a principal teacher who comes up and supports her and supports other classes. We have a currently, and it's current guys at East Ayrshire East teacher who comes in 1 day a week and supports the pupils there. We have 2 classroom assistants, one of whom we have used our PEF. So we obviously can appreciate the numbers are quite small in terms of Little Mill, but because I've got Dalrymple and Little Mill, I'm able to be a bit more flexible and try and bring equity into play in relation to that. So we've managed to get a full-time classroom assistant, and then we have 3 members of staff in the Early Childhood Centre, so we have 2 practitioners and 1 support assistant. We have a fantastic facilities manager who will go above and beyond, as they always do in these small schools, and likewise a clerical assistant who is doing fantastic work there as well. So there are 10 members of staff and visiting members of staff as well that come in through the week.
Thank you very much. I'm sure there are other questions about ASN and attendance and so on, but I think my colleagues will probably raise some of those. Thank you.
How many is in the ACC? How many pupils have you got?
We have 6 at the moment, so we've only got 1 of them coming into primary 1 for the next intake. There are 3, but 1's going to be a deferment, and 1 is going to is a placing request to St Saviour's because for to follow up as part of a Catholic education system there as well.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions, comments? Jennifer Hogg online. Councillor Hogg, sorry.
Thanks, Chair. My hand's up, but it's not showing. Morning, Simon. Thank you so much for this report again. A couple of questions, Simon. With regards to attendance, is it improving the overall attendance? And as far as supported needs, does Little Mill have a higher ratio of children requiring support to others, to the kind of overall numbers within East Ayrshire? I do know, obviously, that we're using the care plans a lot better now in the learning journal, so obviously that's going to have a good impact, but I'm just more interested in what the attendance is currently like, and also in relation to children with additional support. Do we have a higher number within Little Mill?
Thanks, Councillor Hogg. As of yesterday, the attendance was 89.15. We're looking at that through SEMA's system, business intelligence, and we actually are sharing that with the children and with the community on a daily basis, because we're setting a target. Our target is to reach over 90% attendance this academic session. As I'm sure Jenny very well knows as well, that so when one child's attendance, happens, it's a huge impact on the rest of the school. So in an average size school, where it might be 1%, that's 13% swing in terms of attendance rates within Little Mill Primary School. So if you actually do a weighting system, we don't have an attendance issue. We have particular families that we have got wider issues that we need to support in relation to that. And that then does link into the additional support needs, where likewise half of our pupils are on the additional support needs log within Little Mill, and it's a huge spectrum of need. It's particularly around sort of social, emotional, behavioural, around neurodiversity. Again, those big hitters that are coming to the fore. Again, we have some who are on different supports through different agencies as well, which then leads to issues around attendance. So you can have particular families that can be difficult to bring that attendance up, and there are interventions and works in place, but that extends beyond just the supports within the school. That's like all different agencies that are involved to support that as well. We currently as well, we have 3 pupils on the school roll who are placing requests, so very much the main of the children are from the village, and there is that very much that Rankinson community there.
Thank you, Simon. I'll go to Councillor Lennox and then Councillor Sangster.
Yeah, thanks again, Chair. Well done. It's fairly evident that progress has been made at the school, so well done to the head teacher, staff and the young people. It's fairly obvious as well that there's parallels that can be made with Son Primary School, a lot of similarities there. So I think the vote of confidence for the education team at East Ayrshire is enough for me to think that things will get there. So thanks very much, Chair.
Yeah, sorry, Simon's actually, and I was just going to ask out of curiosity where the kids came from. Like, were the majority from Rankinston or some from Drungan, but you've already answered that question, so thank you.
Any other comments? Councillor Canning online, and then Councillor Todd.
Thanks, Peter, and thanks for another great report. I was trying to think how I could put this as brief as possible, and because we're talking a lot about ASN kids and neurodivergence, so I'll be very, very brief, and I've got a lot more to say about this in it, probably for a different forum. So I'll just summarise it very briefly, because it makes me really, really angry, and I'm sure Jane would agree. So I'll put it like this. It's not ASN, it's LSG, and it's certainly not neurodivergence, because I could make a case, very strong case, in Scotland for actually neurodivergent kids being in mainstream. And LSG stands for loved, special and gifted. So I'll say more about it in another forum, but that's basically what I want to say.
Thank you, Councillor Canning. Councillor Todd.
Thanks, Convener. Just for information for members, I was very privileged when I was provost to be invited along to burn suppers in these schools, and absolutely brilliant times to see all the children getting involved. And that's the beauty of schools of a rural nature, where every child performs a function within the burn supper. And it was great to see, and it was a great laugh where the parents come along, Little Mill and so on. And you get a great laugh with everybody. So if the school can do it, it might be too late now, but the burn suppers are coming up. It'd be good to get an invite to members of Governance and Scrutiny, go along to these schools and really enjoy, because you leave with your sides, you know, you're laughing all the way through it. It's a wonderful thing. So well done to these schools that really involve their children, and a brilliant way to introduce the brilliant works of Rabbie Burns to our children.
Thank you, Councillor Todd. Any other comments or questions? Councillor Hogg again. Sure. Councillor Hogg, your wee yellow hand's not shown on the screen, but are you wanting back in for something?
Yeah, it was just I was wanting to follow up, because obviously I was just wanting to follow up and ask Simon. You said a percentage of children that require additional support. I was just trying to find out. You said it was 50%. Is that right?
Yes, that's right. That's correct. 60%, 50% of our pupils are on additional support needs and have child's plans and interventions for them of a various nature.
Okay. And is there any? I mean, that seems to me quite a higher number than other schools. So, is there any additional support given to the school for that?
So the ACE support teacher that we have is allocated on the basis of the level of need within the school, and then the pupil equity funding that is used is also used to supplement the additional supports that we have within the school, and then the allocation of our classroom assistant likewise are for the needs of the pupils within the school too. So there's what we also have within the early years setting is a support assistant. So although we have a number of pupils, of children within the early childhood centre, you know, we have a high level of need there. So there is an additional support assistant who's been put in there. Now, obviously with care within the early years setting, it's different. You know, you've got particular ratios that need to be met in terms of supervision. You know, there's required 2 members of staff there in the small sort of spaces. That's hard. So there's a real big support within the early years as well. But we also have other support from active schools, likewise, that we mentioned earlier, who come in and provide alternative supports to specific pupils. We have a particular active schools coordinator who comes in and works one-to-one with one particular pupil once a week to provide different supports there. So it's not necessarily around literacy or numeracy, but around social emotional. And we also have the strings tuition, of course, within Little Mill. So it'll be coming up to the Ayrshire Music Festival around sort of March time. So Little Mill will be there performing at the Ayrshire. Yeah, absolutely. And they're outstanding, and they're competing up there with, they're punching above their weight. Let's just say that, and they do a fantastic job. So not only are the sort of the traditional interventions, there are these wider interventions that are there that meet the needs of all the pupils within the school.
Thank you, Simon. I think you covered that very well. I don't know, Graham or Linda, if you want about education management support and for the schools, and if you have any other comments about TEF or ASN.
Thank you very much, Chair. I think, first of all, just clearly like to thank my head teachers and central colleagues and Graham for the input to the committee this morning. I know you always find these particular reports really informative, and there's an ownership of that within your own communities in which you serve. So I'm grateful to all the elected members for the support in the space. I was just going to advise we have a live inspection right now. It's currently in Auchinleck Primary School in ECC, so the results are out tomorrow morning. Clearly they take a bit of time around about the filtering through the system, but also, members, for your awareness, there's been a vacancy in Scotland for a significant amount of time for the Chief Inspector for His Majesty's Inspectorate, and it was appointed yesterday, and it's my colleague Ruth Binks, who is Director of Education, Organisational Development and Community in Inverclyde. So as a local authority, we are absolutely delighted at Ruth's appointment, and that she will bring that, you know, continued balance to the team at His Majesty's Inspectorate. But I think the other thing I'd like to say, and actually one or two of them are in the room, we also benefit hugely from a number of colleagues who are actually out there in the field, as I was myself back in the day as an associate assessor, where you go along with His or Her Majesty's Chief Inspectorate, as it was for me, and actually peer support those head teachers who are being inspected and form part of that inspection team. So I just wanted to update you on both fronts, knowing your interest in such matters. Really, Chair, we're really proud of the support that we give our head teachers in the space, both to develop as associate assessors or other roles within Education Scotland, or indeed His Majesty's Inspectorate, but also, you know, given the quality of the quality improvement managers, both in the room and currently working out there right now, and clearly through leadership of Graham in this space in his Assistant Director role, I would like to think that we have extensive support, and that came through our own thematic review that we had as a local authority. Those weren't published, but that was one of the things that HMIE commented on as in terms of us as a local authority, was that you know, rigorous approach to supporting schools in whatever space they find themselves in. But really, from that perspective, picking up the last point you asked me to cover, Chair, that was around about ASN. There's no doubt that there is rising number, rising demand, and clearly as an authority we will be, as a central education team, we will be returning to you very shortly vis-a-vis a cabinet paper to you in due course around about what we consider to be the final update in regards to how our young people with ASN can be educated in their own localities. You remember, colleagues, we have had papers with you previously around about our concerns about young people being transported significantly long distances to attend some of our ASN centres. So I look forward to returning to you in due course with that paper and speaking to you in the coming weeks as to the content there. So thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Linda. Any other comments or questions? No one online. Okay, thank you. Elected members, I'll direct you back to the work papers. It's page 25, paragraph 2. It's a publication of the inspection report for Little Mill Primary School and ECC. Note the strengths and areas for improvement. Note further inspection in December 26. The next steps, and otherwise notes the contents of the report. Happy with that, elected members? And just before our head teachers leave, I think it's only appropriate we congratulate all the head teachers, the leadership, all the staff at the schools, the education management, and the support people that go and help these schools when have inspections coming, and of course the pupils. It wouldn't be a good school if it wasn't for the pupils who are all buying into it and enjoying their education. So well done to everyone. We've 3 very good inspections here and 3 good stories that I hope the general public will watch on YouTube and find out more about. So well done. We'll take a wee quick break and let you leave before we go to the next report. Can I suggest a 10-minute comfort break if anyone needs to pop to the loo, and we'll come back in 10 minutes, please. Thank you, elected members, and welcome back. Well, the next report we're going to is item 6 on the agenda. It's the review of councillors' code of conduct decisions, so we better be on our very best behaviour. We're going to David Mitchell. Thank you, David.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, members. Now we've had the wheat, I'm afraid we have to deal with the chaff. In terms of the previous reports, it was good to hear Councillor Todd waxing lyrical about his enjoyment, but I thought he was actually talking about these committee meetings rather than the burn supper up at the school. But I'm sure it applies with equal effect for all members. Members, this used to be largely for this council an exercise in schadenfreude, in that we were bringing a report here every year, which the Standards Commission require us to do. They produce their annual report. This reflects their annual report for 24-25. I appreciate that ended last March, but they only produced this round about October, November, and we then need time to look at it and bring it here. It would have been at the last meeting, but we continued this one because it wasn't as much a priority as the other business that you dealt with earlier in December. But it is useful. I think members that when you get to the next paper around the workshop and the annual self-assessment, I know that's very dry, but it should be looked at through the lens of this paper, because that's part of our governance arrangements, and our overall governance arrangements, notwithstanding any issues that may arise from time to time, because there will always be issues in something as big as complex as the council with a wide range of services and 6,000 staff, etc. But the bottom line is, since the code came in over 20 years ago, this paper notes only the second upheld complaint against any East Ayrshire councillor ever. And that's down to you guys and your predecessors. So we've had only in single figures of the number of complaints made, and we're only at, this is the second in here, and I'll come to that in a minute, and I'm not drawing attention to it because you've already dealt with it. But in terms of the overall picture, East Ayrshire has always been the outlier, because we do governance well. And when I say we, I mean all of us, and I mean you now, since the last election, and your predecessors under previous terms of the council. The statistics, I'm a lawyer, evidence is important, the statistics speak for themselves. This is only the second ever in over 20 years where any of our councillors have been found to be in breach, and a small number have been subject to complaints where they weren't found to be in breach. We do have 2 horses in the race for next year, but they're live. We cannot comment on them. They're not for consideration, and they may or may not lead to a finding a breach. If they do, they'll be in this next year's report, and if they don't, they won't. The point I would make as well is that when a complaint is made against one of your councillors and it's upheld, the Commission do require us to report that to Council. So while we do have, unfortunately, my view, unfortunately, for the Council, not the individual, one in here, but we took that to Council at the time, and you as a Council have looked at that and acknowledged the action taken and the censure that was applied, and also agreed and determined no further action was questioned. So I would urge caution that that particular one, and the purpose of the report being here isn't to discuss or focus on that particular one. The purpose of bringing this report is primarily, or partly, to give you oversight of the overall picture, and we give you those numbers, but as I say, they're not really, they're of passing interest, because we only make up a very, very small number of those reported cases. But we give you that to give you that context. There are individual councillors who can rack up 2 in a year, never mind councils that can rack up 2 in a year. We've racked up 2 in 20 years. So I'm just saying that to give you some comfort as governance and scrutiny members that our governance isn't bad. It's good, and that's part of it. But the other part of bringing this is, it's like lawyers. It's all right knowing what the statutes say, but the statute might be 50 years old. You need to know what the court said when they interpret it, and that's part of bringing. What we're bringing here is the jurisprudence. You can see what the Commission approach they take in certain things, and you can see also now the level of sanction being applied, and there's a lot more 1, 2, 3 month suspensions than there used to be. So they are starting to show a bit of teeth, but it's horses for courses. There's no tariff. It's not, well, an inadvertent failure to declare would be that and that. You'll see actually, I think there's 2 identical cases in there, or on the face of it, but with different outcomes because they look at the actual intent and on all the circumstances. What I would draw your attention to as well is, remember, it's a 2-stage process. So complaints go to the Commissioner. The Commissioner's office is responsible for investigating them, and he'll form his view. If he is of the view that there's no breach, he will report that up for information purposes for completeness, but it's really where he thinks there's a breach that they then go to the Commission, and they will hold a hearing in most cases. I think they've tweaked their approach now, and if it's minor, there might not be a full-blown hearing. They might do that remotely in terms of proportionality, because those hearings all come at a cost. It's a bit like planning, because the Commissioner doesn't always get it right. The Commissioner will refer them up. You'll see there's a couple there where they found, and I'm at page 40 now, because what the Commissioner's report includes is, and it breaks down into 3 groups, and there's 3 appendices with this paper to give you all the case details. So you have those that were reported or referred in 23-24, and the hearing was held in 24-25. You have those that were referred and held within 24-25, and then I go back to my point about the timing of the Commissioner's annual report. At the bottom of page 41, you have those that were referred in 24-25, and the hearing's actually been held in the current year, 25-26. But if they left it till next year, you'd be reading about those ones next November. So they rightly give you everything that's been dealt with at the point where they issue the previous year's report. So that's the jurisprudence in the last 12 months. And I'm not going to go through them all. It's a bit of a tiptoe through the minefields. I would hope that all members of this committee do take the time, and would commend you to read not just this report. I would hope all members have a look at this report on an annual basis. I would commend to all of you to look, dip in and out from time to time, the Commission and the Commissioner's website. You've got copies of the code and the guidance, but they issue other action notes, advice notes rather than action notes, and there's other information there. And what I would say is, if you find yourself looking at the Commission because you've got a complaint in and you're wondering what might happen to you, that's a bit late to maybe be availing yourself of those materials. It would be better to be looking at that on a precautionary basis and trying to keep yourself right. And then the other bit of all of that is myself and Craig Young as the Deputy Monitoring Officer are here to support you and provide advice and guidance in terms of the interpretation of any of these. So it is important in the grand firmament of things, and the fact that we haven't had many complaints in our record, and that's a proud record, and you should all be proud of that, and the council can be proud of that. We're only as good as our last report, and we need to maintain our standards so we don't just end up being the same as everywhere else. As I said, I'm not going to pick out all the cases, but one recurring theme, and I know it comes up everywhere, but I highlighted that not every referral is found to be a breach. If you actually look at page 40, there's a couple there that might be worth a look, because actually, and we're into technicalities, these are ones around freedom of expression. So you've actually got one there, but they called the chief exec a liar. Terrible. And they found technically it's not a breach, but they actually, when you delve into the detail, it would have been a breach. But when you overlay the European human rights analysis and the right of political and freedom of expression, then they have a greater tolerance limit for what they think is acceptable within a chamber than perhaps the Commissioner does. So I think he takes a more precautionary approach, but it is worth having a look because it covers everything: failure to declare, failure to declare an interest, either register or declare it before a meeting. The other one I would flag up, because this is where you do get into a wee bit of the technicalities, is on page 46, which was poor old Councillor Nelson, no relation Stuart, at Inverclyde Council. And this brings out a point that always comes up. They had an interest, I think if I've got the right one here, they had an interest because this is the one. So this was a proposed development at a former IBM site in Greenock, and the council's interest was it was very near his house. So you might think that, well, fair enough, it's near his house, most folk would be inclined to vote against something that might be noisy or messy, etc. But then if it's a redundant site, his interest might have been, I'm actually quite happy to see something done there because it's a blight near my property and once they're building that. So the point is, he went on and voted, and he voted in favour of it with conditioning, and he didn't argue for particular conditions, and there was no benefit or favour to him. So I'm just trying to make the point that we often get into conversations when we're trying to give our best advice to any of you around the when you declare and what you should declare. And there's a live conversation going on with councillors just now, and I'll come back to you as appropriate before the council budget meeting around some of that. But of course, you need to know what's been proposed to a meeting before you can understand whether or not and assess you've got an interest to declare. The point about that Inverclyde one was he voted in favour of it. So if most folk might think, well, if his interest is going to impact negatively on my property, he didn't let that interest sway him because he voted in favour. But as I pointed out, the point is the interest could have gone the other way, and actually the property price might go up if a brownfield site's regenerated near the property. The Commission are quite clear, and this is a bit I know we all struggle with, because how you voted has no bearing on whether or not you should have declared an interest. And what they actually say there is they find no evidence or fault that councillor went in to particularly secure an outcome that was favourable to him. It was an inadvertent failure to declare, but they absolutely reassert, and this is an important point for all our councillors, all councillors everywhere, is that what they reassert is you apply the test, not based on how you think you're going to vote or how you know you're going to vote, but how the man in the Clapham omnibus, the independent and objective member of the public, might think you could be influenced based on the interest, and it's the interest only. They will look at how you vote, and it might impact on whether or not they censure or apply a higher sanction, depending on how great the interest was and how else you may have acted. But they won't make a finding of no breach, and they made a finding of a breach there. I think they just censured in that one because it wasn't clear, any clear evidence that they'd actually sought again. So the point I'm kind of now clumsily trying to make is, and we've had this conversation on a number of occasions, when we come to assessing the declaration of interest, it's before the meeting, it's at the beginning of the meeting, and it's based on, and it is difficult because it's your assessment of whether the independent person's assessment of that interest would be such that it's so significant you can't possibly do justice to the decision, whatever the decision is, and whatever your view in the decision might be. So there is a break there, if you like, and you can't try and argue, well, I didn't act in that interest, and I knew I wasn't going to act in it, so I didn't declare it. It's there for a reason, and if it's significant, you should withdraw, even if you are quite clear that your interest isn't actually going to make you vote in a way that's favourable to you. You can't rely on that after the event. So Councillor Nelson there took the hit for everybody, and that's probably just worth bearing in mind. As I said, I'm not going to pick all the others out. I mean, I'm a nerd when it comes to this. So I could bore you all day with this, but what's more important is that members appraise themselves and make themselves aware of the approach taken. I go back to what I said, it's all right knowing the rules and the code and the guidance, but it's also helpful to know how the Commission are interpreting them and applying them. And over the last 20 years, they've built up their own body of case decisions and what you might call jurisprudence. They're not a court, but we'll call it jurisprudence. And that's just as important, as I say, and I would front load it and keep yourself aware and abreast of these trends and developments and what latest approaches, etc., and advice notes before you find you need them. I'll stop there, Chair, members. If there's any other particular questions, I'm happy to take them. I appreciate the reports are quite lengthy, but I'd rather not start editing them and then potentially be challenged of selectively editing them. We produce all the reports as produced in the annual report and bring them here for your interest. So these are their summaries, and I don't think they're over lengthy, but I appreciate there is a lot of them, but I would encourage members to dip in and out and to avail themselves of that. And that's all members, not just members of this committee. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, David. It's quite interesting that quite a few of these are disrespect to other councillors or to members of the public or to council staff. And it's it's really not something I've seen much of in East Ayrshire. We're usually very polite and respectful of one another because we're all here today the same job to represent our communities and do the best we can for our communities. I think there was an email a couple of months ago, just a reminder about etiquette to address one another as Councillor Todd, Councillor Sangster, Councillor Lennox, and keep that title because that keeps the respect thing up front and centre as we're addressing one another. Elected members, have we any comments or any questions on these Councillor Code of Conduct decisions? Councillor Todd.
Thanks, convener. Thanks, David. Just a bit of clarity, and I apologise I put you on the spot here, but in terms of something, and I've looked at them through the years, so you've got a headline of what the person is called to be scrutinised on the headline. The part that I don't find it difficult, but I try to get my head around the interpretation that the group of people, because you see disrespect towards a fellow council, and that comes up a lot. So who audits the folk that are making the interpretation that they're doing it evenly, even-handedly, where a councillor has been accused of being disrespectful towards an officer or a member of the public, another councillor has been accused of being disrespectful to a member of the public or an officer, but there's two totally different outcomes. So how does a councillor put, obviously they will be interviewed, but what's the criteria or what's the selection process for that decision, whether it goes that way or it goes that way?
There isn't. It is each one in its own merits. It's the only way it can be. They don't control the complaints. Anyone can make a complaint to the Standards Commission. There are a lot more complaints made than you'll ever see reported here because some of them just don't make the filter. They're just not relevant at all. But the Commissioner, remember, it's 2 stages. The Commissioner receives and processes every report. I can't quite remember the current approach. There was a wee bit of a frisson there. We are in public session, but there was a wee bit of a difficulty arose between a previous Commissioner a wee while ago and the Commission. And I think that one had come in and inherited a bit of a backlog. And I think they were trying to find good, sound, solid ways in their view to reduce that backlog by moving things through quicker. Because I think under the old rules that even if it was like clear there was no breach, but he wasn't acting as a councillor when he did that, so you don't pass go, they still had to report up to the Commission where they'd found no breach. So the Act wasn't set up with a kind of filter, a triage before you get to investigation, before you get to reporting or not. And they found that they thought there was a lot getting put out at an early. So they actually called the shots and pulled the strings and created a situation where the reporter had at that point, so the Commissioner had at that point to report all cases they took a view on, even the no breach. But that just clogged the system up further up. So the big anaconda balls just made it way all the way up the process. Things have moved on now. I think they have a better trust relationship with the current Commissioner and they leave the decision to the Commissioner. But that's why they do these annual reports. It's not just the board is all. They do the reports because there's 2 answers as opposed to if they make a decision that appears unfair or contradictory or politically biased because, well, the first thing is in your scenario, the circumstances are never exactly the same. There's also then how people present at a hearing in front of the Commission. I don't know that you're interviewed. I think they tend to do it by questions and answers. Maybe more complex cases they'll come out, but I don't have a lot of experience, but we've only supported a few. And it's always been, these are the questions, provide the answers. And I think they do that the same with the members as well. But I'm not part of the process where they're investigating our members other than as monitoring officer. The Commissioner will always come to the monitoring officer with certain points. Does a member attend training? Did they take advice in this particular issue? What is their and that kind of a thing. So we provide generic information that gives a context to that councillor, the complaint against that councillor. So the first thing is, that's why I go back to, we produce the detailed reports because the devil's in the detail. There are some of these you read, and it's like any other case decisions. You read them, you're going, he said what, or she said what, that's it. Get to the end there, right? And then, what? No censure. And that gets where they're very, very cautious because of course the short and the courts have an overview. If they make a decision, and at least one councillor at Renfrew, who's a frequent flyer, who's had more complaints against them than we've ever had in 20 years on his own, he's not there now, but he judicially reviewed them at least one occasion. So that would be the remedy if you think they've made a decision that's unfair, unsubstantial, or influenced by bias because they found against you, but not somebody for another party in the same circumstance, if the circumstance were the same. But the other point I distracted myself from was, if you go in there and say, I said that and I'll say it again tomorrow, and I've no contrition and I've no recognition, and that's maybe inappropriate, they're probably more likely to hit you with a big stick than if you're going in saying, it was the heat of the moment, I recognise it now, and it's not my normal approach. I go in to be collaborative, not confrontational. So it'll depend on how you present to them, like anything else. But I suppose if two folk are charged with assault, in what seems like similar circumstances, one might get a guilty after a trial and one might not get a not guilty, depending on how the witnesses and the lawyers and the judge and everybody performs in the day. So it's down to your theory of judicial determination. But I would say that there's two short answers. As one, anybody who feels aggrieved can judicially review, so they would be held to account to justify. And if you can point to different decisions in exactly the same circumstances, then they've got a case to answer in the judicial review, because Wednesday principles would require consistency and reasonableness, and it wouldn't be reasonable to just toss a coin or make it up or support your friends in one party and not another or whatever. Not that any of that happens, they're all politically neutral. So the courts would have an overview, but by publishing it all, then anybody can look and take a view on whether or not there is a consistency, subject to getting into the detail and understanding the nuances, because there are some in the face of it you can't get to until you go through the detail. And as I said, they're basically saying, I said that, but because of this political right of political expression, it's raised the threshold of what is or isn't acceptable. And sometimes now they are actually saying it would have been a breach, but for the political consideration, and when you apply in the European rights article, freedom of political expression, they step back, they say it's not a breach. And we're precluded by human rights considerations. Remember, that's now built into domestic law, so they have to consider that. And when they get to the point of considering the human rights impact, they have to step back from holding it a breach. So when they started factoring that in the last few years, it actually seems to have raised or allowed a higher threshold in terms of what folk are saying in chambers. But I would just go with the basic. If you wouldn't like it being said to you, reflect before you put it to somebody else.
Thank you, David. I have a few thoughts on it. And are you okay, Councillor Todd, with that?
No, thanks, Convener. Thanks for letting me back. It raises no concerns, but raises the case of the term Nazi. And I just wondered about that point where somebody accuses a person of being a Nazi. Would the Commission allow that person to explain why? And here's the proof of why I called that person. Now, everybody knows I hate Nazis, but that's going to raise its head the way the world's going. And I just wondered what way they're going to, how much in-depth investigation do they make on the person that's been accused of being a Nazi that would allow the person that accused them to make that term?
I think there's two things in there. One, I know you spoke in the first person there, but you are referring to another councillor in another case. Secondly, I think if I just looked at that one again, that's the reference was being made. It was a generalisation. It was a comment made by a member in their chamber suggesting that folk who'd attended a particular rally were Nazis, which I struggle with, because you'll have seen in the paper yourself, members, the rally was a women's rights rally, which wouldn't be the kind of thing you would normally think. But it's in there and you've seen it in there. They do dive in. Remember, they have a hearing, so you're there and you have the chance to state your case in front of them, regardless of the Commissioner's investigation. You go to the hearing, whether if they're at all considering anything more than essential, there'll be a hearing. And at the hearing, you can put your whole case. So they would have gone to the councillor and the monitoring officer at the investigation stage and said, well, what is the context of this complaint? Because it might have been a member of the public who's just viewed it and didn't know any more. And they would offer a view and they'd give the context and say, this was the event they were referring to. But it did come out in the detail there. And this is a bit I can't reconcile, because it's factual. that it does seem to have been accepted that somebody who'd been leading or organising one of the groups at that rally in support of women's rights was known to have Nazi or far right-wing ideology support and be at other events of that nature. So there was something in the facts that applied to an unnamed person that they had in sight when they referred to them generally. But it's that sweeping generalisation. And if you just refer to Nazis plural when you're actually talking about one person that you've got particular knowledge of, you'd be as well to be clear about that without necessarily naming and defaming them. Yeah, the process would allow you to make that full explanation, and they would have sought the background facts. And if you were putting up into the commissioner saying, well, I know for a fact that a Nazi, so I didn't say a Nazi, right? I know that, right? Then they would go to the monitor office and say, any comment, and we'd say, well, locally we know that individual, that's him with the swastika in his arm in the picture. And that would go you one way. If there's no evidence that the poor maligned individual's got any tendencies and he's just reporting somebody's heard or somebody's made up, you're going down. So it's the subtleties and the detail that will make the difference. I'm not saying they're bad decision makers. I don't want to give any impression. If I have, I would correct that. I've no issue with the decisions they take from a legal perspective, because whether or not I agree with it, I understand what the extent of the protection for the expression of freedom of political expression. And it's that protection they're applying. So they're saying normally you wouldn't get away with it, but because you are a politician in a political context, you can say a bit more. Which to me is dangerous. I'd be going the other way. I'd be saying because you're a politician in a political context, say less, damaging, or, but it's that balance. And they find their way through. But the commissioner doesn't, he'll err on the side of caution and let them make that human rights judgment, because that's where you've got the full detail based on a hearing where you can hear folk face to face.
Right, well, a few people wanting in. Well, Councillor Cannon on line first, and then we'll go to Councillor Sangster and Councillor Lennox.
Yeah, thanks, David, and thanks for that report. I think I'll be very brief. I think, without being complacent, I think it's pretty clear how we, to use David's term, we're an outlier, because we've got the foremost expert on code of conduct in Scotland, I think, in David, and I would agree with everything he's just said, particularly the bit about don't say things to others that you don't want to say of yourself. We've got arguably the best leader and most respected council leader in Scotland. And anyone watching our chamber will see that there's never usually a raised voice. And I'll qualify that by saying, I think the only time I've heard raised voices I can remember in the chamber in 3 years was the most recent council meeting. But I'm kind of hoping that's a blip, and that we remain an outlier, and that we remember everything that David tells us. So, yeah, thanks a lot.
Just a couple of one point I would make. I think it goes wider than any individual, and certainly not myself. Any knowledge or experience I've got is pure theory, because we don't actually have a lot of practical experience in dealing with these, but I'm happy to keep it that way. I would encourage all members to adopt that same approach. I think one of the strengths we have, and one of the reasons, and it's beyond governance arrangements, it's down to how we conduct business and have always conducted business. And I think it's wider than any individual. As I said, I think the overall political leadership and the collaborative approach we've been able to take, what goes on in our chamber around budget doesn't go on in many other chambers, if any other chambers, maybe those in Highland where it's mostly independents, but in most local authorities you will have that polarised proposed amendment and second alternative budgets and all of that. And I'm not saying that's either good or bad, but that then can create all sorts of situations when people are at odds, whereas we take a whole fundamental different approach, and it's more collaborative, and try and get, because we've always had that recognition, and it goes back to, I think, 2017. I remember sitting upstairs on a Friday afternoon after the 2017 election, and every council in Scotland was a minority administration. And what we said, and that's still the case this time, and what absolutely that drove home was that there is a greater need for everyone else to adopt that same collaborative approach, because fundamentally, when any council, and I'm broadening this out, when any council is struggling with all the financial and other challenges every council is struggling with, if you get to that polarised, trying to score, not supporting administration and all that, and petty local politics, it can override. Whereas, and I know there's a drive to do that, and we've had those conversations with a lot of you, but the way we do it is actually the best way, even allowing for a political context, because folk can clearly be seen to be trying to do the best for their communities by coming up with a single budget. Because the point with minority administration is if you can't get your budget through, any minority administration, if you can't get your budget through, what's your choice? You give up. You should really resign the administration. You've seen that posturing in a lot of councils. You threaten, and then what logically happens? Those who said we can't support that budget are now sat with the task of finding a budget in the same terrible, challenging financial circumstances. And that recognition has always been here in East Ayrshire, that whatever party or group holds the most seats, you've always worked together in the budget. And that's that, I think. So we're not creating situations where those tensions can spill over into this kind of conduct, because at the core of what we do business, not just with governance arrangements, not just applying with the code and declaring interest, at the actual core of how we approach the business, we have that collaborative approach, which actually reduces some of those tensions and some of those conflicts that can otherwise arise. That's just my view. So as a kind of pat in the back for all the members, which you don't get often from me, so enjoy it.
Councillor Sangster? You're okay now? Right, okay. Councillor Lennox?
Thanks, Chair. Thanks for letting me. I'll be brief as well. I mean, I think the example on page 46, Councillor Nelson, no relation, for me was, it's kind of spelt it out for me, because there have been instances where I think I've could potentially have got into the same situation. Maybe naivety is not the right word, but certainly lack of experience. You can unintentionally get yourself into a situation like that. And I'm really grateful for the advice that's been given, not only for David, but Craig as well, in terms of keeping us right. And because the last thing I think any of us would want to do is put yourself in that position. So grateful for the advice, and I would urge members not only of this committee but everybody in chambers just to remind themselves of the code of conduct and keep it sharp in your mind and at the back of your mind when you're getting into a meeting. It's easy to put yourself in a position that you wouldn't want to be in. Thanks, Chair.
Yeah. Said a blank, actually. Yeah, what I was going to say was simply that the one that brought it probably to a head is, and I struggle with it sometimes, it was electric vehicle charging. So there's a paper coming to our cabinet, our council, was it last year's budget, where we hadn't charged for charging electric vehicles, and we were proposing to introduce a charge. And that's where this would fit in, because we had to try and convey, as this does to members, it doesn't matter that you're going in to vote to introduce the charge, and the only obvious interest would be as the owner or operator of an electric vehicle, that's going to cost me money. It doesn't matter that you put that impact on you aside and voted to bring in the charge because it was the right thing to do. Strictly speaking, with the code, then, well, you don't pay for the charging your car, and you might next week as a result of the decision. So the average person's going to look and say, well, that's an interest. And the fact that you didn't vote in pursuit of the interest will get you a censure over a suspension, but it won't get you a finding that it's not a breach. But try telling members, and it's that budget context. So we do write out, and there's certain dispensations for the budget, we cover all of that. But I will also try and include, given particularly the position with the health and social care, bespoke advice, but you do also need to see the detail of what's in a paper before you can take a final position on whether or not you have an interest to declare. And if anyone's ever in doubt, there's always the secondary option of at least a transparency declaration, which will, even if they find down the line, no, you should have declared an interest and withdrawn in a situation, then the fact that you at least did the transparency declaration will stand you in good stead than if you look like you never even thought about it or bothered to take advice or declare it. So we will issue again the pre-council budget advice, and I'll try and be clear to members with the particular situation around the health and social care. But I would ask all members and members in your group when they're saying, but that won't affect me. That's not the test. It's not a retrofit. Did it influence your vote? It's would it? And if it would have or could have in that objective view, you declare and you remove. Even if you know, I would have voted for it. It doesn't get, it's not a defence. Whether it should be is a different matter, but it's not a defence. So you're right, and that's why I highlighted it. And as I said, appreciate some members are looking for as best advice as we can give, which we will give as always before the council budget meeting in February.
Thank you, David. Councillor Canning, you another comment?
Yeah, I was just very brief. I mean, I think just to be a wee bit more succinct than David, because with all due respect to David, that's not maybe his strength, but I mean, it's just what David said. Just, I mean, to me, it's quite simple. Don't treat others or say anything to others you wouldn't want said to yourself. We learn it at primary school, but we forget. And I think if we just remember that we're not always right, and we respect all 32 members, and that they're all valid opinions, it's not actually that difficult. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Canning. If there are no other comments, we'll bring this item on the agenda to close. I think it's just, we are respectful. We're a good bunch on the whole, and we respect one another. We are public facing as well. I know it's hard. You can go to a meeting and things can get quite heated. People are passionate about issues and feel you're maybe not doing enough to deal with an issue they've raised. It's difficult to keep calm and keep respectful when someone's maybe getting a bit shouty. So it's tricky, and we all have to deal with it. But we have a very low level of complaints for this council. Long may it continue. We'll do our best. Thank you.
No, sorry, Chair, there was one point, and I promise we'll fire through the next three, but it's like Christmas, this one. It does only come once a year, so we might as well enjoy it. It was just around, you made the point earlier, the only point I would make is our strong governance arrangements are the product of that building block approach. It's not doing one thing right or just making the right decisions or taking advice. It's all of us doing the right thing as much of the time as we can. It's every bit. So I appreciate some of it seems trivial, but remember what sets the parameters of your governance. It's the rules you put in place or your predecessors put in place as a councillor. The standing orders on conduct at meetings isn't something an officer came up with. Those are the standing orders that have served this council since the beginning. They're your rules of engagement. You can change them if you want, but they are your rules. Sadly, when I wrote out the last time, and I'll raise it because it's been a subject of a little bit of mirth and mickey taken since, I feel, but we did have a member raising more than once. I've had members raising the matter of addressing chambers because it's not a major issue, but it does arise from time to time. So all I did the last time was write out and remind all 32 councillors your approved rules, which is your standing orders for the conduct of meetings. And that says the proper, so it's not David Mitchell says or Eddie Fraser says the proper form of address and off your cap and bow 3 times. Your standing orders require that. If you want to soften them or bring them and change them and call each other mate and whatever and surname, you can do what you like, but those are the rules and there's no point having any rules. Any rules if you're just going to ignore them, because that starts the erosion of governance. So whether it's the standing orders or more importantly the financial regulations or the scheme of deals, they're all up for change. You're the council that approves all of them, but whatever they are, we should all operate or abide by them. And if we've got rules in place that any of us are ignoring, then we should question why we have them. So that's the general point I make, but the bigger point is every little bit. And if we start to erode there, and let standards slip there or there, it starts a creep. And then suddenly we will find out one day we're the same, I won't say basket case, we're the same as any other council in Scotland and no longer standing apart. So we need to keep all the plates spinning and we need to keep all the elements as tight and as strong as we can, because one crack in the firmament and the whole thing can come tumbling down quite quickly.
Thank you. And as I say, we are public facing. Sometimes it's tricky. I don't know if you want to comment on social media. The number of times I've seen stuff on social media, I don't know if any of these complaints have come up on social media, but you see something that just makes you angry and this person's talking nonsense, the temptation is to reply to it and put them right. But you don't. You just don't. You're a local councillor, so you let that person be wrong and you don't reply to them, you don't put them right, because you don't want to start a back and forth on social media with folk calling you names and different stuff. It's tricky. David?
I'm not going to make any comment on or about social media. I think some members at least will have heard me say before, I subscribe to the view that when they're talking about 666 being the number of the beast, in the old Hebrew alphabet, the letter W was the sixth letter of the alphabet, and there is at least a school of thought somewhere in the world that the reference to Armageddon and 666 was in fact the reference or anticipation of the World Wide Web and all the good we do with that. So I know that's nonsense, but that probably does still sum up my own view of it. But I appreciate as politicians it's there, and you absolutely need to be both use it and be able to both respond and sometimes not respond as appropriate. All I would say is there is clear and detailed guidance on the Commissioner's website all around that, and I would urge members to print that off and sleep with a copy of that under your pillow.
Okay, I like to members. We'll take you back to page 35 in the report. Paragraph 2 is note the statistical information provided by the Commissioner for Ethical Standards in Public Life Scotland and the annual report. Note the decisions taken by the Standards Commission and the appendices, otherwise not the contents of the report. Elected members are happy with that. Thank you. We'll move on to the next item on the agenda. Item 7 is the update on GNS Committee Action Plan and arrangements for annual self-assessment, including workshop. David.
Thanks, Chair. I'll refer you back to the previous remarks about the building block approach, and obviously this is one of many building blocks to our overall governance approach, because Governance and Scrutiny Committee has an important role to play in our overall governance at every level, and the option to scrutinise decisions taken at Cabinet, and rightly so. We have, in order to keep this committee performing at its best and support you all in discharging your functions in this particular committee, then, as you know, we run two things. We have, in the last few years, adopted the whole SITFA approach to the annual self-assessment. That's been identified as clear best practice. So, as you know, once a year we sit down and go through the big detailed SITFA checklist that none of us like, because it's too wordy detailed like me, but we go through that and then we kind of soften that and said, well, we'll do the deep dive because it comes around quite quick and there's not actually that many issues arising for the reasons we've discussed in the previous paper. So what we had done latterly and what I'm proposing you continue to do is do the deep dive every second year and more of a review every other year, because it's probably the best use of time and resource. Separate to that, there are no fixed arrangements, but from time to time we arrange a workshop event, which is an informal meeting, so it's not a public meeting recorded, there's no minutes and agendas and reports, but we have that opportunity for you to discuss and think about two types of things. One, any particular training needs. Now, that's not just a one-off annual assessment. If any member, and if we identify through the normal business of the committee that there's an area where training would be merited, you don't need to wait to the next ad hoc workshop for us to raise and discuss and agree and put something in place. But that's a kind of catch-all, as well as the other arrangements and what Kathleen Hewitson does with all you and your groups in terms of the general elected member development programme beyond just GNS. So we can take and identify areas any time for training, but the workshop is to allow that space for a conversation for members to say, what about this, what about that? The other aspect of the workshop is in terms of supporting the committee to broaden its activity and get away from just there's a report for officers, there's officers presenting reports at great length, etc., but looking at other ways of doing business, looking at whether members feel from what they know of the operation of the council, are there any particular areas that are either perceived to be forming not as well as they might, so is it worth looking and taking a deeper dive as a committee to see through proper scrutiny what might be capable of being improved and how, and to support that process. Sometimes as well, if you recognise areas of good practice, is understanding, you know, what works there and where it might work in other services. So it works both ways. So you have your workshop, and the last one, I think, was November 24. You identified 3 topics. 2 of them have been held: the attendances and the absence management across the council generally that Amanda Lowe led on, and then you've had the first of the 2 education ones around, I think it was attendance, non-attendance in schools, and the third one, for different reasons, around that wider ASN piece, is still to be arranged, and is being arranged, and will be held in due course. Because of the whole review, education colleagues felt it would be better to produce the solution, and the detail of the approach that's been subject to that detailed review. So that's just about the timing, but it will come. So bottom line, that's a long way to say what you have in front of you is a report that basically does 2 or 3 things. It says, there's where you got to with the last self-assessment. There's really no particular issues out of that. There's only a very small work plan at Appendix 1 or action plan. And most of these are things you've identified that we just need to keep doing on an annual basis through the self-assessment process and pick it up there. So there's really not a lot there, but just asking members to make sure you're happy that's complete. We're suggesting and asking you to agree arrangements that will arrange the next workshop towards the end of May. There's an event at the beginning of May that will be keeping us all busy, towards the end of May. This year, and Stuart's come up with a very good idea, if you like it, and if you don't, it's still Stuart's idea, that we take the workshop and we have it alongside the self-assessment, on the basis that at the moment we just call it ad hoc whenever you have the appetite, and it makes sense to actually have it once a year alongside the self-assessment, because part of the self-assessment is to identify training needs, so it would feed into that part of the workshop. It also means it's not floating and waiting to be fixed on an arbitrary basis. We would have an annual opportunity for you and your successors to talk about training needs and areas where you might want to apply scrutiny in a different way, and depending. So it brings a few things together, and if members are happy with that approach and you agree, the paper will make arrangements for the next self-assessment and workshop towards the end of May. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, David. Elected members, are we happy with the recommendations, paragraph 2, which is page 81? We approve, note the outcome of the actions, agree. We approve a work plan coming up, which is in Appendix 1, and a self-assessment process and workshop. Otherwise, not the contents of the report. Elected members, happy with that? Thank you. The next item is item 8 on the agenda, is final measurements on capital works contracts. 1st of April to 30th of September. We're back to David Mitchell again. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. I'll be brief with these 2, providing nobody asks me about procurement matters, and then I'll slip into anorak mode again. But leaving that aside, then this in the next paper are 2 parts of a whole. We used to always report, and I'll remind you again, our scheme of DEL is such, and standing orders in relation to contracts are such, that provided any contract is awarded on the back of a regulated or a compliant tender process, then we don't report them to committee, because if you've been through a due process and you've got an emerged preferred bidder, legally there's no decision to be taken. That's the person you have to award the contract to. So we try not to bring reports to committee or cabinet inviting decisions that aren't really decisions. It's noting outcomes, so we bring them here so that members have that sight both here on the outturn of contracts and in the next one in the award of contracts. We used to always do the award of contracts paper, and it was a former member, maybe chair of this committee at one point, who'd identified that, well, we tell folk what we've awarded, but we don't report the outcomes. And part of that as well was there's a general perception, sadly, that, you know, every council contract runs over time and runs over budget. And actually, anybody who regularly reads these papers will see that as not the norm. It does happen. And what this paper tries to do is set those out and explain the reasons. And if any further information is required in any given situation, we can do a deeper dive and ask for that from the service. But this is every contract. We report the outcome on every contract. If it goes over 10%, you need to go to Cabinet as soon as you know you're over 10% and get authority to increase the budget. So you've got a degree of oversight at Cabinet on the business side. But what this applies is scrutiny to all the ones that don't go over 10% and get reported separately. And what you'll see is they don't all go over. There's as many go under, and there's as many come out just about round about where they should have done. So that's the purpose of this one. Obviously, they're not all my projects. I'll leave it at that. If members have any particular questions or queries, I'll either answer them or undertake to get you more detail from the relevant service if I don't have it here. Otherwise, Chair, I would just commend the recommendation to note the report.
Thank you, David. Any questions or comments on any of these contracts? The bulk of the reports on the appendix. Councillor Todd.
Thank you, Convener. Just in terms of, see if it's agreed within East Ayrshire Council, whatever department, that the contract that was there previous did not meet the level of performance that we would expect, would the legislation in awarding contracts part allow us to use that as ammunition to say, we're not awarding you the contract?
If you do it right. If you do it right. I said, don't ask me procurement, sorry, it's Councillor Todd's fault here. Very quickly, we support good contract management. We have put up the whole scheme available to all contract administrators in terms of the guidance and the manual on good contract administration. I've said before here, a good contract is one that works for both parties. If it's unduly onerous or excessive for one party, it might be good for the other one, but it won't last. And they'll either find ways to make up the losses or it'll break. Proper contract management requires regular engagement with the contractor. It requires meetings on the bigger contracts. And it needs to recognise that you don't get everything exactly right when you set the spec. You can be down to a lot of detail. You might think, well, we'll need 3 deliveries a week of X, whatever the commodity is. And you might go out and tender and all the market intelligence when you do your commodity strategy. For that, you want 3 deliveries a week. But that'll be based on current usage and anticipated volumes of X, whatever X, not eggs, X. Don't mention eggs or the milk. You meet and engage, and you may agree. You may agree 1 year into a 4-year contract for the supplier X that the supplier's saying, look, this is costing us both money. You don't need 3. You're not ordering enough for 3. Let's change it. The contract says 3. Let's agree to change it to 1. And you would do that. So that's how you capture, right? And then when you spec it the next time, you'd say, well, it wasn't 3, it was 1, right? So you learn as you go. And the whole contract journey that I banged on about before should mean that each time you go out, you should have a better idea and a better specification. It should be tighter and it should be less whatever, and profit and well, not less profit, but reasonable profit, etc. So the other side of that is not just catching the good things or the things that can be tweaked to people's benefit. If there's performance failure, we should do it through the contract. There should be a record. Right? We should not just say, well, I'll get you next time. But if you don't, you can't go anecdotally and say, oh, well, you've put in the best bid for the retender, but you were actually not very good. That was my language in public session. You're actually not very good. You can, if you have built up a case that shows they're not performing, and no very good means serious failure to perform, you should be breaching them. If they've been breached and had a contract terminated, you don't get in again. If you've said, oh, well, we're nearly at the end, and actually, they tried their best, and so you don't do that, then you don't have anything to hold against them there. So it's what goes in, comes out. So if we do it right, and I know there'll be different contract you may have in mind, and I stress, if we do it right, and if we actually manage them, then in certain circumstances, if it's bad enough and you get to the end conclusion of termination, then one of the things in the mandatory prerequisite, they have to declare, have you ever had a similar contract terminated? Well, it doesn't matter if they declare it or not, we know because we terminated it. But you need all the councils to do that, because if they're breached down in England, then you can perhaps use that against them. But if you're doing it and we're all too busy and we don't do it with the due process, and I never wrote it down, but I remember they were late that week and all that, then no, you couldn't. So if you follow the process and if the performance is bad enough, then in certain circumstances, yes, you could.
Okay, elected members, page 94, and it's the recommendation, paragraph 2, just not the contents of the report. Thank you, elected members. The last item on the agenda is page 101, awarding the contracts, 22nd August to 7th November. We're back to David again.
I would refer to previous comment. This is the other side of it. We regularly report every contract that's awarded is included in one of these reports. And again, it's in support of, because what part of good governance is openness, transparency and accountability. And that's what we achieve here with the council's business, because anyone can look at this, and for any contract we award, they can see who got it, what it was awarded for, the price, etc. And they can see who else bid and who else, what the value of those other bids was. So all those folk out there that mutter in dark corners about brown envelopes and all the rest of it should come and read this report every time it comes, because that's the absolute antidote to that kind of nonsense. Because none of our councillors are involved in any decisions around award of contracts for the reasons I've said, unless it comes to Cabinet by exception for an authority to negotiate or extend by exception, because it's not going through a tender process, depending on the circumstances. So this is the absolute antidote. And if anyone is in conversation with yourselves or writing to you or on social media suggesting otherwise, just keep referring them back to this report. Because this report shows who we do business with and how we do business. And if anyone wants to find fault with this report and suggest there's evidence here that we don't do things in an entirely appropriate way, good luck to them, because that evidence doesn't exist. No, they won't find it. They won't find it because it doesn't exist. Absolutely.
Thank you. And these council reports are all public. They're online if anyone needs to look for them. And we're back. I think that's us. Contents of the report. Page 101, paragraph 2. Note the contents. Elected members, that concludes our agenda today. Thank you for your attendance. We'll see you at the next one.
Thanks, Chair.